Hello everyone and welcome to Just Put Paint on It. With me, Skari, your grateful host, wonderful co-hosts, and even more amazing guests. This is your Tuesday through Friday hobby show, normally 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, on Twitch, sometimes on YouTube and Facebook, where we sit down, we chat, we hobby, and discuss the finer things in life. Sometimes some toilet humor. However, today, one of my guests is a renowned painter, someone who, if you're in the hobby community, has been around for a long time, taking things to the next level. But before we get to that, let's introduce my wonderful co-host, back from the brink of death, Matt. Hello, Alfarious. How are you, sir?
I am perfectly splendid.
You are alive.
I am alive,
That's
yes.
good. That's good. It's
Yes.
always a good day when one is alive. Make sure you use the chatbot, MattBot command on Twitch. Sometimes, eventually, I'll get it working on Facebook and stuff like that as well.
Gotta record that thing for you, right?
Yeah, I know. That's usually how that works. Also, it'll send you to and give you instructions on how to send Matt all your used magic cards. Please do. Please
Yes,
send them
please
all
do.
your random magic cards that you have no idea. So, really excited. Good morning, Fart McButtface. Hi.
I
That's
love
a
it.
fantastic screen
I
name to
love
start
it.
the stream on. Right now we're so you've just got back from your own stuff. You've been working. You got your puppies done in the last little bit of the stream, which is super exciting. Do you want to show off some of your puppies there that you've been working on?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah.
We'll just turn that off and get a little platform for them. Fuck it. We'll just
Nice.
hold them up kind of one at a time here. But
That's good. Renlor says, just put paint on it. Yeah, that's the spirit. We kind of do that on stream a lot of the times. Sometimes we don't get any work done. If you can't tell, I play Death Guard. They stink, says Fart Buttface, which is hilarious. A little bit further back. A little bit further back.
just trying to focus on my fat fingers.
It definitely is. Yeah, no. Well, I like those little puppies. They're really fun.
I'm really bad at this. Sorry.
Yeah, right now Kenny's trying to access, if you're on Chrome, you have to give it permission or the resolution is too high, which is the issue we had with Andy Chambers.
Oh, right, yeah.
I remember that. He was like,
Why is it all the big
working.
names that are having
I know.
problems?
He's definitely got like way better camera equipment than I do and whatnot. Now, he had a bit of a puppy emergency, which means that he had to go to the vet early this morning, so that's why he's running a little late, which is fine. But we're all patient. We're all waiting. I'm super excited to have our guest on for today, Mr. Kenny Boucher, of Next Level Painting.
I'm not happy about it or anything. Haven't been a fanboy of his for the past. Crap, it's been a long time.
Has it been a long time?
Well, I remember.
No, you only talk about him all the time.
I remember. I think it was one of the last Berry Bashes that was held at Sir Games-A-Lot, like when the game room was across the way in the big red room. I had got swag I had won some swag from him. And I remember that it was that Berry Bash that I was like, I'm going to show this shit off. I'm more proud of the shirt that I'm wearing than I was of the army that I was bringing.
Yeah. Why is it not showing where he is? That's odd.
Because you can't see him.
I can't see him. Can you see him?
I wish.
It's not showing. What's the coolest thing that Kenny has ever taught you?
Holy crap. The coolest thing? just to stay icy, would be to, like, honestly, it's one of the most basic and simple things, but it's like always keep the tip clean.
There we go.
And that really
just the tip clean, right? Hey,
Yep.
Kenny, you're in the sidelines. If you can hear us, we can see you now. So that's all good and ready to rock and roll. So without further ado, let's introduce our guest for today. I'll just put paint on it, Mr. Kenny Boucher. Keep it fresh and take it to the next level and all that good stuff. How's it going?
I came in. As soon as I came in, I heard your boy over here saying just a tip clean. I was like,
yeah.
I was hunting my shirt that I won on one of your Twitch streams. That it was like, always keep the tip clean, and like I don't know where it went. It's buried, but I'm like I gotta rep my swag. But I gotta rep my swag.
Maybe 5 years.
Yeah.
There you go. Hey,
this one did have your signature up here, but I wore the shit out of it. So.
Oh my god, that one is like probably also like 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Back in the day. How's the pup doing, Kenny? Pup's okay?
She's in bed with her mom right now.
Okay.
The tiny dog. I just found you on Twitch. I'm gonna fucking raid you from my channel, which has nobody on it.
I'll take the raid from Kenny. Yeah.
Your viewers aren't awake yet.
I'll turn my mom on, so at least it's one person.
There you go. Well, it's also, make sure you check out, if you don't know about Kenny, use the command guest and go to his Twitch and hang out there. And you do quite frequent streams, don't you? Screams.
Yeah.
Streams, right? Like
I streamed today, dog.
Yeah. And you also you're teaching lessons on painting and like hobbying and all that stuff, and you're a busy man, which is awesome. And you do commission painting and all this stuff, don't you?
I
You don't do that
anymore.
Oh, anymore. You used to.
It's impossible to do both. All right, I have successfully rated you with 2 people.
We'll take it.
My epic buy, but no, I'm busy, yeah. But I had to quit commissions about 4 years ago to do this stuff. Like, there was no way you can do both, So, but if you have a business that's built around painting models for a living, it is still risky to say like, I'm not gonna do paint jobs for money anymore. I'm gonna try this instead. Big risk, but this year will be our 11th year of business, and 4 years, almost 5, not commissioning anymore. So.
Like half of that. That's it's definitely a leap of faith, as an entrepreneur, like doing your own thing. You just kind of have to like pull the plug and be like, let's just go for it.
I always tell people like if you're gonna jump into the scene, like you're gonna start being a commission painter, like always for sure. But like there's always gonna be a moment when you're gonna have to make a decision to leave money on the table in order to pursue another table that has more money on it.
Yeah.
But you can't have both tables. Right, so
pick one or
and
the
still
other.
Be a living, right?
Right. So you literally are not allowed to have both tables. But if you pick the table that has more money on it, you might not have any tables for a couple months. You know what I'm saying? So like it was a big risk. Like about 4 or 5 years ago when your boy got that dope shirt, that was the beginning. But we did. I mean, I'm glad you commented to it because we did. We have migrated mostly into education. That's the future of our platform.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's getting quite competitive out there in terms of like painting techniques and like tutorials and all this stuff going on, so it's not, and I will say, Kenny, like your sort of Twitch style, like Twitch streams and whatnot, and everything that you were doing with like the Long War and stuff as well, like that was one of the biggest inspirations that got me onto Twitch as a platform. Back in the day when, just listening to you guys on the podcast talk about how miniature painting or miniature figures, right, is like the keyword to use on Twitch because they literally don't have any other keywords. Yeah, it's like the only keyword that's like relevant to our game, really, other than like Warhammer.
I mean, Twitch has been a journey, right? Like Twitch is like 4 or 5 years ago, there was like it was just video games, right?
Yeah.
And then they had like the creative like section of Twitch. Remember that? So we're creatives, right? Mm-hmm. But it was vastly unsupported.
I remember some of the first streams that you did, and you're just like, I don't know what this shit I'm doing right now, but let's just do it. Like head down and did it, and like you saw this beautiful progression of like quality of the stream, like just the knowledge that you create, that you were giving it as well. It was like, I'm learning, so I'm going to teach you at the same time, without maybe you knowing that you were doing it. But it was always like, this is the camera that I'm using. It's shit. This is the camera I'm using. It's awesome. Like your curve helped our curve.
I mean, that's one of the, thank you. I appreciate you say that. That's one of the secrets, is like a lot of people like in the past in this hobby have like coveted their secrets. You know what I mean? So like back in the old days before the YouTubes, people like would figure shit out and just not tell you.
Yeah.
You know, like that's just, and then as YouTube kind of was invented, like in the old days, YouTube was like a place to go to find funny videos and people doing songs and shit, you know, like, and doing like cool comedy. Then later it became this place you go to figure out how to, you know, change your valve covers out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then so people just started to say fuck it and posting stuff on YouTube, and then like that kind of changed the culture to like, you know, like if you don't hide your secrets, you know, you present them, and then people might be so grateful that they might give you money, right? So it is like a tip model, you know, like that you're, and then more precisely, it's kind of like a free to play video game.
Yeah,
you know, like it's free to play, and you can do it all free and jump around, see all the videos, take notes, and figure it out. Or you can, there's more direct avenues to pay someone, and that's where the education comes in. Is like all the education's free, but you have a direct line. That we're planning on launching a full blown education platform probably by the end of the year. You know, that transcends like Patreon. You know, like that leaves Patreon behind.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's more like
that's where I think the future is.
Educational website, right? Which I think, and I think you're 100% right. And it's so important to, especially in like this age of information, to, like you share what you know, and you kind of like, you know, you preach, but you sow what you reap. You reap what you sow, right? Like you put positivity out in the world, and that shit comes back to you, right? Which is awesome.
There's a fact. You're right about the competition. It's very competitive, but I think it's more accurate to say like the market right now is like you have lots of people advertising what you do for free. It's like a better way to look at it.
That is also very true.
Like I think that's probably like one of the ways I've been a little more unique. Me and my partner Rob have been a little more unique in the space, is that like we never look at people as competition. We look at it as literally people marketing for us. Like, because if you're out there doing the same thing I'm doing, then you are educating the consumer that this exists, that painting miniatures on the internet exists, and like no one person can tell everyone, but like if all these hundreds of content creators are like educating the consumer that this is real, then basically you have an educated, you know,
customer base.
We've always been very happy when we see up and comers and people who bring the heat. Like, you know, when I first saw like Miniacs videos on YouTube, I was like, finally. Finally, like we got some like ridiculous heat up in here. You know what I mean? And that's gonna like, again, like it tells so many more people about the reality of what's happening. And then again, like now people are launching education tiers on Patreon left and right. And again, all that does is inform people that purchasing a, you know, like a class on the internet for miniature painting exists.
Yeah.
So the onus is not entirely on one person. It's like we're all like kind of sharing it. And the cool thing about this hobby is that the pie is so huge that there's enough slices for everyone. Always been that way.
With that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I love it. So this is the part of the show, Kenny, where we sort of like, you know, tell people what we're working on today. I'm working on some Hellions. Just kind of getting some.
Oh, let me guess. You're working on Dark Eldar models?
Oh, am I that much of a giveaway? Yes, I am.
I have never not turned your YouTube channel on and not seen a Dark Eldar video.
I've already been typecast, so I might as well just go with the flow.
Yeah, just go with it, right? I'm working on a Lord Aquilar or whatever the F-bomb this guy is. I don't know. He's going with my puppers.
Is he a Stormcast, right? Is he
yeah.
Stormcast?
Yeah, okay. He makes my Vanguard hunters battle line.
Oh, okay, cool. Sounds
We'll
exciting.
find out.
So a lot more
I
information.
see in chat my boy Jim Vessel tuning in.
Yeah, Jim, what's going on? We just had him on the show last week, actually. He was really excited to sit and chat and paint and chat. And everybody in chat, thank you, welcome. Hope you're all having a good time wherever you're tuning in from. The chatbot command bot's going around, so you can figure out more about where to find Kenny if you don't already, and you've been living under a rock for the last 11 years.
Yeah.
Other than that, yeah, I'm really happy we actually got to get this sorted, Kenny, because it was nice when I finally met you at ATC in 2019. Was it? That was
it
fun.
the last time there was an ATC?
Yeah, the last time before this whole crazy, pandemic thing happened.
I think 2019. It sounds right.
Yeah, I was, and I remember just feeling that you were a lot taller than I thought you were, because you are a lot taller. Yeah, and you usually are like in front of a computer, right? Like sitting down.
I've been working for 10 years making it seem that I'm shorter than I am.
Yeah. So I think that was the one thing that I really took away was, holy moly, he's a lot taller than I thought.
That I successfully tricked you.
You did. I tricked.
What I do a lot too is I go to conventions and I always change my height when I'm taking pictures with people who are shorter than me. So like when I take selfies with people, I'll kind of like squat down a little bit, so we're the same height. And so I just always do that shit. And then when people are taller than me, I just let it ride. Like they're way fucking taller than me. So awesome. It always looks so like if you see your friend who you know is like 5'6", you're like, Kenny's like 5'5.5". We've been like a decade, dude.
That's awesome.
Dude's shoulders are as wide as he is tall, man.
I love it. Renlo says he got to meet you at LVO, and was it really cool? Took time to say hi even when it was between rounds.
Oh,
yeah, because you ran. Yeah, Renlor says hi. He, you and Kenny, you and Rob were running like one of the RTTs, weren't you? Like in 2018. Did you do it in 2019 too?
Yeah, we've done LVO twice, I think.
Yeah, long-word doubles.
Long-word doubles twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Adepticon 3 years or maybe 4. Can't remember.
Nice.
Can't remember a year that I haven't done a long-word doubles at this point. It's a fun event. We're looking forward to getting back to them. And with 9th edition, the format is just pretty much not to fuck with it. It's like it basically is a battle point format already, and the whole architecture of long-word doubles is trying to create a 50% hobby score, 50% battle score experience. And then we actually tweaked it to 80% hobby score, 20% battle score. Nice. Because after years of testing, we realized that like even 50-50 is not enough to stop just, rampant dick stomping from always being the winner. Because you're trying to find that balance, right? Where, not that I love competition and I play in all the fucking events, but I want to create an event that respects the actual time investment. Because realistically, how many minutes of this game is playing it versus thinking about it and painting it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you play this game physically 1% of the time. Right.
Yeah.
So our event wants to kind of encourage that. And so going to 80-20, but then kind of manipulating the ITC format to fit in that percentage took a little bit of work. But now that it is just straight battle points, we just take that new number and manipulate the numbers. And so we'll just be playing book missions just like everyone else in GT format. And you keep what you kill, basically. Like the points you score in the mission are what you score. But that total is only 20% of your total score.
Yeah.
Whereas you got to bring reasonable, you got to bring fame, you got to bring comp, you got to bring sponsorship, you got to bring painting. And so that's been pretty successful, especially in a doubles format for getting people who aren't quite ready for a tournament because one of their friends at their hobby shop is. And so it's nah, dude, it's doubles. Let's go.
Right.
I got you. And it does really well. I mean, we had 285 people at Adepticon playing the doubles. I think almost 200 at LVO last time. So it quickly becomes. I mean, I think we have more people playing in our doubles than they had in the singles.
Yeah.
And I was like,
That's a claim to fame, right? Like that's some shit you can brag about.
Yeah, well, it's funny because here at least in a lot of the tournaments in Canada, like in Ontario where we do events, best overall, which is that coveted hobby sportsmanship generalship award, is still considered like the top award.
as it
Which is
was
really cool to see
before
that.
all of this, before all of the
Right.
pro tours and the competition,
Yeah.
etc. It was the guy who won was the guy with the highest combined score.
Yeah.
Yep.
And like
Exactly.
best general was like probably had the highest battle score.
Yeah, it's usually what it was. It was who came here to win games and who came here to win games, show off a good army, be a good sport. Yeah.
Like and when weighted hobby scores left the scene, it changed. But then you saw people putting back like the Renaissance Man style award, and then hobby trackers. So like it's pretty good to be in 40K right now.
You got to start tooting your own horn too, because hashtag bring hobby back was a huge movement. Like it really was. It really did reintroduce that whole like, hey man, put some effort into your damn models. But honestly, like you got these quickfire tutorials that are like, I'm going to show you how to take your base coded models and just take them to that next level, and it's real fucking simple. And boom, here you go.
One would even say it's secretly easy.
It is like an ancient Chinese technique.
That's correct. All you have to do is hashtag just put paint on it. Simple solution to that problem.
I'll be like hashtag just put paint on it, hashtag but good.
But good.
But
yeah.
good. I love it. Now, Ken, are you working on anything today?
Dude, I have a stream to do at 5. I'm supposed to have something ready.
It's in here, folks. Make sure you tune in at 5 for the stream.
I feel like what I have is a 3D printed model. I'm supposed to get off the supports and ready. Oh, look, I can actually. I'm a professional. I can switch my camera. Oh wait, is there a keyboard shortcut in this? No, I just gotta click it like a homeless person. Just switch my light over.
There you go. You can actually get Kenny working on some stuff, which is awesome. We have so Matt had this. Did you get those questions ready, Matt?
Oh yeah.
Nice. So Kenny, while you're doing this support thing, Matt had this cool little premise he wanted to try out, and with some questions for you. So I'm gonna let Matt explain it and get it going here.
Sounds like a would you rather.
A lot of people want that.
Yeah, a lot of people do. It isn't quite. Basically, it's like this rapid fire thing. So you're going to have 120 seconds. We'll do 2 minutes. I have a series of questions. The rules to the questions are you don't need to explain. So you can just like answer the question. You can always say pass. And if you don't feel comfortable answering the question, and we'll see if you can get through the X number of questions that I have written down here.
Yes, sir.
You down for that?
Yes, sir.
Well, I better set up a little timer here.
Oh, you know what? I can pass this stuff.
Timer. 2 minutes.
Cool.
There we
We're
go.
gonna call this rapid fire. Blam blam blam. Blam,
Exactly.
Like there you go. Rapid fire. Let's go.
I really like that.
Yeah.
You let me know when you're ready.
I'm always ready. Come on.
All right, perfect. Okay, here we go. What is your go-to snack or meal?
Dates.
Do you want to pay, or do you want to paint to play or play to paint?
Both.
What model have you hated painting and will never do again?
I will paint all models again at some point, but I think Eldrake is probably the worst model.
Oh, that's like 5 for 5.
What is your favorite color to paint with?
Just one?
Just one.
Yeah, I guess if I could only pick one, anything in the purple, pink spectrum.
Excellent. What is your favorite thing to listen to when painting on your own time?
Audiobooks.
What project have you always wanted to do but will never get to?
Project I've always wanted to do, but I'll never get to. Nah, that doesn't exist.
So
if I want to do it, I will.
Awesome. If you were not a hobbyist / gamer, what would you be doing?
Concrete.
Do you feel like you chase the meta or create the meta?
Somewhere in between.
What has been your favorite model to paint?
Last year in 2020, Gasgol.
What hobby-related thing are you the most proud of?
Hobby-related thing. Probably my Death Guard army I finally finished.
Cool. Who would narrate the movie of your life story?
Who would narrate the movie of my life story? Jack Black.
Oh, I love it. If you were a professional wrestler, would you be a face or a heel?
A heel.
What would your superpower be if you had one?
To make people poop their pants on command.
If you could only attend one event each year, what would it be?
Adepticon.
Good time. Awesome.
Woo! That was some spicy insight there. Dates. I did not expect that to be your go-to snack.
Nice sugar. Love it. That's awesome.
Like dates are my jam.
That's
be careful how many you eat though in one sitting. You will poop yourself.
So it's like, yeah. Well, if you see Kenny going around Adepticon handing out dates to people, you can tell him, that he's practicing his superpower.
Oh yeah.
It's awesome.
You don't understand the power you would have over people if you can develop that ability. I'm just looking at you on a TV screen right now. Poop yourself right now. Literally. What if I can AOE it? You know what I mean? Generate get fucked. You know what I mean? And I said the ability to make you shit your pants. This is magic, dog. It's a magic superpower. So you're sitting there I'm not wearing pants. How can I shit them? It was aren't you wearing pants though? And you look down there.
You've got pants. And you've shattered them.
Well,
so how many did you get through? How many did you get through?
13. There was 13 questions. And now, granted, we should have probably added a few more seconds because, we all responded to them. That was awesome. Perfect. Good choice. Stuff like that. But
Jim Vessel says he knew you'd say Helldrake.
He knows. I've only painted 4 in my life, and the rest I've commissioned other people to paint.
It's funny because every guest that we've had, or almost every guest except for one that we've had since we started asking those questions, has said Helldrake. It's apparently it's universally hailed as the worst thing to paint in all of the land.
It's just an option.
Oh my goodness.
My mans wants to know if you practice your superpower on Rob at the beginning of every Long War stream on Twitch.
I have been low-key trying to make him shit his pants on command for a decade.
I could just picture his face too, right? Uh-oh.
At this point, he just expects it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Nice. So what are you basing right now? What's it?
Well,
what model is it?
I'm not going to get the support. I'm not going to. Okay, so the supports on this 3D printed model. This is from actually Rob prints these. So I'm just going to soak this in hot water for 5 minutes and it'll just come right off. So this will be something I probably try to paint today on stream.
Are you using those as your Blightlord Terminators or?
No, I'm not. I have. These are supposed to be Death Shrouds or Blightlords,
but they look like the dudes from the Fifth Element.
Yep. It's the old style. The monkey resin, Pop Goes the Monkey, he sells them. Mm-hmm. I've got a couple, but in my army, they're just actually Death Shroud Terminators because I already bought them. But if I didn't already own Death Shroud Terminators, I definitely would be buying these motherfuckers. And this is supposed to be totally not a Lord of Virulence. So this is pretty cool. I like this one. But I have these guns I'm supposed to finish for this orc model that I actually owe the owner of Pop Goes the Monkey. And so I was like, God, I got to put some paint on these fuckers. And so I kind of got them roughly chipped. But I realized that my hoses look like shit right now. So I'm going to smooth those out because I don't want to be lazy about it. I was being lazy when I was painting. Sometimes I get slack here. Sometimes I get slacker on guns.
Do you ever get to the point where you just put a model down and go, I need to take a break from this model and then paint something else, and then go and then like revisit something, or do you like to make sure something is done before you sort of like move on to the next project?
Like for my own stuff, when I'm painting my shit, yeah, I usually finish it before I move on. But when if my stream stuff, I'll jump around as needed for the promotion. But if I don't feel like painting, I just don't. That's like my rule. If like, you're sitting there and you're like, oh, I'm supposed to paint these, these 5 whatevers. And if I feel like it's work, then I just don't paint.
I guess that's like super important to like prevent burnout, right? When you're like literally surrounded by it all the time.
Oh yeah. Like you basically just, if it feels like you're about to go to work and it isn't your job, then just don't do it. Like just go do something else. That's always kind of been my thing. Wow, just smoothing out some fucking hoses.
I like it.
Some ghetto ass wet glazing technique.
Wet glazing ghetto technique. By make sure you're taking notes here. Something that I actually learned early on when like actually physically starting to watch people paint was how they held the brush was more important than I originally thought. And how
brush,
they like
brush
applied
technique
the paint.
is real important.
Yeah.
There's a lot of brush stroke technique, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. And I think a lot of people who jump into painting who might not have any art background or experience with it kind of get confused by that, because the easiest parallel between picking up a brush for the first time, like the easiest thing you can kind of correlate it to is drawing, right? Like, and pretty much every human has picked up a pencil at some point and drawn something on a piece of paper, Yeah. So the problem is that even though it feels like a pencil in your hand, it doesn't react in any way like a pencil, right? A pencil is like 1-to-1. You press, no matter how hard you press, a line is going to occur, and no matter where you put your hand, that line's going to happen, So they kind of feel like that's how paint should work, but it is not. It's simply not, right? This is like these are hairs that I'm trying to like transfer liquid to a surface and then make it do what I want. So there's a complete disconnect. And because of that, it's really just about transferring this liquid to this surface in a way that it sits where you want. And so because of that, there's lots of brush control techniques. So we're using the tip of our brush, we're using the side of our brush, how much moisture, how much paint, how opaque, how transparent. So that's where it starts to get a little bit confusing.
Yeah. Chris Marshall saying, I like my hobby station. Thank you very much, Chris, and everybody from Red Leaf Customs. It's funny because I got it and now it's half. Like I only have half a station because I don't have enough paints. So I'm gonna have to spend some time putting more paints in my paint station. But it's cool. Now I have a place to put all the paints that I get over time, which is exciting.
Skari, you asked me what is the number one thing that Kenny's taught me over the years. The number one thing. And what did I say?
You said clean the tip.
Yeah, I'm gonna add something to it.
Oh, quick shade mixing medium.
That's it. The minute that I saw a tutorial on it, I went out and bought 2 cases of this shit.
That's some stuff.
Well, like I mean, 12 bottles, right? And I'll never go back.
Like that's. I mean, that's the proprietary medium that the Army painter washes are suspended in.
Yeah.
So that's just like such a good way to spread it out and still maintain the heavy bodiness that is kind of unique to the Army painter washes.
Yeah.
And the other cheat code is just like using flow improver. So like kind of the opposite direction. If you want to thin it down a little bit and lower its opacity, I just use some flow improver. But all in all, the Army painter quick shades are like, if you're gonna buy a thing that's marketed as a wash, buy those.
Yeah.
Nothing's really better.
Have you ever gotten big into like painting competitions, Kenny?
No. No.
Oh, it's a yes or no question, so that's great. Yeah.
No. Painting is I mean, art is highly subjective, and most painting competitions don't have a strict enough rubric for me to be like interested. Like it's like, oh, we're painting large models. Okay, that doesn't mean anything. Like unless we're all painting the same model with the same color scheme, like then it is too objective. It's too subjective to have any real objective score.
I totally, you describing it that way makes total sense.
But if you said we're all painting a GW Stormcast Eternal basic as fuck, and they're all going to be, and you have to use gold as your predominant color, but they're not telling you what brand or anything, and they're not telling you like what dioramas or anything, we all have to paint the same model with the same predominant color. That's a completely different fucking story. There's a lot of objectivity to that now.
Yeah, who painted it better, or who painted it more technically, or whatever. Yeah, no.
Yeah, and then you could actually break down your scorecard right into like certain agreed upon artistic elements to see who has the highest score. Because the whole concept is you have to bring objectivity into something innately subjective, and they do a poor job at most painting competitions of that.
Mariano Quesada says, "Hello, everyone, all the way from Argentina."
Oh, Argentina all day, every day.
That's right. We've got quite a global community. It's fun how like global the community gamers in, and painting is one of those things where no matter where you are in the world, painting or who you are in the hobby, like the painting is just as important as the playing. And we discussed this earlier, but it's funny how like it transcends cultural boundaries and everything. It's just like everybody can pick up a paintbrush and put some shit on something, make it look cool.
Fact. Fact.
Cheeky Desk Nurgling says, any tips for painting black power armor?
Oh yeah, I get it. That's a common email I get.
Yeah, don't.
Well, I mean, like I would say, first thing is don't get hypnotized by your airbrush. The issue, and like especially if you're painting, you said power armor, so we're talking Warhammer. So the problem with Warhammer is there's already pre-established narratives for like every color. So your audience, aka the person who looks at your model, is going to be unforgiving of a value-based paint job like white or black, but very forgiving of a color-based one. For example, blue, ultramarines. I can use like basically any fucking three blues. One is dark, one is bright, one's in between, and I can generate as much drama or not in that value sequence. And you're gonna be like, "Yo, sick ultramarine list." But if I do that with black, you're gonna be like, "What the fuck is that? That's some gray ass looking death company there, buddy." Like same thing with white scars. You do it with white scars, they're gonna be like, "That's not white scars." But for some reason, you do it with any color. It's because of values, right? And we have a narrative attached to it. If there was no such thing as a white scar or a black Templar, and I presented you my white scar that had a little gray in it, you'd be like, "Yo, it's a sick white to gray fade." You wouldn't. So people are gonna get hung up. So when you're painting black or white or something almost black, like even Dark Angels, you need to like sort of not do any transitions with your airbrush. So you got to just paint it straight black. And then all the intrigue you're going to generate in the black power armor is going to come from your edge highlights. So that's when you get to start incorporating things like blues or whatever into your crisp edges. If you deviate from that, it's a high risk that the person looking at your army is not going to think it looks like Black Legion. And then that's going to make you feel sad and defensive. And so you're not going to get like the end result of good art, which is you feel good about it. Because it does take an audience to tell you how cool it looks to get that final achievement,
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So, yeah, it's funny because when you look at like all the heavy metal or whatever, that stuff, it's like, especially in 40K, no, you're right. There's like this preconceived notion of what specific colors should look like. Yeah.
Yeah. GW, and because GW has such a healthy narrative backing, all these like chapters and all this like backstory, like people get very like they hold that shit mad precious. I can show you my like kind of like overly faded white scar, and one person can be like, "Yeah, that's cool. It's like white scars, right?" And then another guy can be like, "That's straight up not fucking white scars," because like that's his favorite shit, So you kind of have to be deliberately boring when you're working the value game, but you got to ice it up. You got to crisp it up with the edge highlight game.
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't always subscribe. I don't always practice what I preach. Don't get it twisted. It's just like, honestly, that's the easiest way to do it.
I remember feeling that way a lot when working with my Black Templars, trying to get that like Black Templar color from like 3rd edition, which was like with a very bluish sort of like highlight, right? It was like almost a blue
Yeah, you mix a little blue in the black, which is actually what I'm doing now. But
yeah, and I could never get that right, so I ended up using more like grays than like blues.
Well, and you know what? I'm glad you said that because that's actually a follow up to the trick. The trick is don't use fucking grays. Don't because that's paid by numbers. Like if you grab a black, 2 grays and a white, that's always going to be a fail rate. You just want to use black and white. So you painted the model black, and then using the same black you already painted the model with, you're just going to add a small amount of white to it. And you're going to basically control how dark that gray is. So rather than pick some like middle of the road gray that somebody told you to use, you're going to make a gray that's barely not black to generate your highlights. And that the fail rate is so mitigated. And then you're going to add a little bit more white, do another round of highlights, then a little bit more white. And then by the time you've made it actually look gray, you've done like 3 sets of progressive highlights that were so easy and so safe that even a big fat errant stroke will kind of just blend into the paint job. So that's kind of just do that progression, control your paints. And if you're going to introduce blue to it, you're going to basically just take a little blue, and I even have blue and black on my palette, which is crazy. Is like basically what I just make like a kind of like a gray to start with. That's a blue gray. And then I'll just add as much black to it as I need to. Right. And make it as dark of a gray as I can for my first few highlights. And then from there, if I need to keep brightening it, I'll just add a speck of white, a speck of white, a speck of white. And so that's always the right solution. Don't paint by numbers, when painting black and white. Just use black and white and make your own mix.
Yeah, that's a question I get a lot at the store is, I'm looking for this particular GW gray. And I'm like, do you have black? And they're like, yeah. Do you have white? Yeah, you can make it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I could, and it's like, hey, I want your money. But on the same note, like, do yourself a favor and just, okay, you want to do a 50-50 mix? Buy a mixing bottle. It's a hell of a lot cheaper.
GW did a great job of making painting easy for people who maybe new when it comes to, because it's a paint by numbers guide, right? They're saying, hey, here's all the blues we use to paint this model. Now it's really easy to say, well, they just want to sell you a lot of colors. Obviously they do. But simultaneously, by saying, if you use this blue, then you highlight it with this blue, and then again with this blue, it's going to always work. That helps somebody who is kind of nervous about blending actually start painting, right? Even though someone like me looks at those 3 blues and I'm like, that's the same fucking blue. All those are the same blue. They just have a different
value. Yeah.
Exactly. So once you get comfortable blending, you realize, and I call it using your artist eye, just, scanning kind of the real estate and knowing that if I only used this black, this blue, and this white, those are the only 3 paints involved in this paint job. I can kind of like look at this little pipe here and kind of guess how much. And then I can kind of mix it and then kind of be like, yeah, that works, and it will match. It will always fucking match.
Yeah, especially once it dries as well. And then
yeah,
that makes sense. See, and that was the thing, right? So I kind of went for that gray because I wasn't really an artist when I was learning, and it always felt like the army was like way too dark and like didn't really have the vibrancy that I was kind of looking for, right? But then I ended up like complementing it with like other reds and yellows and whatnot. And that was
then it has
20
snap.
years ago. Yeah. And eventually you kind of learn different techniques and whatnot, and that's a big thing. Justin Kiefer says, book is starting to leak, huh? Can't wait for the new Dark Eldar decks. And Stuart Reed says, Kenny! All in caps. They're very, very excited to see your hands, buddy.
Stuart, what up, player?
I'm doing my own chapter called The War Masters, says Cheeky Desktop Nurgling. They use the Sons of Horus gene seed, because Cole is a seedy bugger. They're white with Sons of Horus green shoulders and helms. And we should all drink every time Kenny says, don't get it twisted. says
Get it
says
twisted.
Reziel. That's right.
I'm
That's a
drunk
dangerous
already,
game to
so
play.
oh boy.
If you're gonna have a drinking game, you can't exactly tell the person who's in control of the drinking game
Not to say
the
his signature
booze.
catchphrase.
Right?
Yeah. You know, you're just
I mean,
just
you're the
asking
one
for
drinking,
it.
so are you an alcoholic?
Are you
Do
just
you need
looking
an
for an
excuse right
excuse?
now? Do you need to look over your wife and be like, "Well, Kenny I'm playing this drinking game. I mean, I have to, you know."
I have to. It's only 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Amazing. Yeah, so well, that's an interesting and that's the thing about color theory. Now, did you go to school for art and stuff, or have you just sort of put yourself through school in that sense?
That's also an amazing question with a lot of answers. First and foremost, yeah, I went to school. I have a technical degree in commercial art, 3-year degree from Robert Morgan, Votech. I've got most of an associate's in graphic design done, but I bailed on that because I realized I already knew it all because I already had my technical degree, so I felt like a waste of money. And then in and out of art classes my whole life. Parents were very encouraging of art, kind of like forcing me not to forget that I liked art. Even when I was a teenager, I wanted to go out with my girlfriend. They'd be like, "Well, I already signed you up for art classes on Saturdays at the community college." You know, it's like, you know. But the other part of that question, which is like, did you just kind of put yourself through school? Is like, I would say anybody who is artistic, who's got like that inclination, does that. It's basically like I like to say, like if you're like passionate about art from a young age, and your parents kind of like authorize you to be a crack addict about it, then you will basically go on like a 20-year independent study by the time you ever even make it to college. So then, fast forward, you're in college and you think you're kind of artistic and you show up, and then there's like these two, 17, 18-year-old kids in your college class who are like just so ahead of you. And you're like, man, these kids are just so fucking raw talented. I'll never get there. It's like, no, there's no such thing as like, I'm bored with talent. Those kids just finished and completed a 20-year independent study in art where they were just cracking out endlessly on art and being encouraged to. And you showed up thinking you were going to learn this shit, and you're 18, you're 20 years behind, dog. You know what I mean? Like, and so it's really difficult to jump into it at like 20, 30, whatever, and be like, I'm going to just be a dope artist. You're a grown up, dude. You have responsibilities, man. You got to go to work and shit. You can't just crack out on fucking drawing pictures and shit for 5 hours a day, Yeah. So, yeah. But the cool thing about what we do is that it's very different than art. It's very procedural. It's very technical. And so making models look good, anyone can do. Literally anyone can learn how to make a model look good because it's not really, it's like, in my opinion, like classic art. It uses only the technical elements of art.
Would you say that it's not science?
It literally is not science.
To kind of go along that vein, like I went the very first bout of college that I went through for graphic design. Now I'm going to date myself here, and that was in like 1993, where their idea of graphic design was very, very different, but we still had to do a fundamental fine arts class. And, I always kind of like had a good grasp of art, but I really wanted to be more along the lines of, let's make some billboards, let's do this, that, and the other thing. And these kids danced circles around me on quite literally drawing circles. Like they were perfect. And I remember doing like an hour-long class 3 times a week where it was line theory, basically. It was draw a straight line. And we'd spend an hour just drawing straight lines, different thicknesses and stuff like that, and then make circles and make them perfect. And after a year of that, I was like, no, this isn't for me. I didn't even get into the graphic design aspect of it. I was like, this isn't for me. But talking with some of those kids, and it was like, how long have you been doing this? And they had gone to like art schools. That was their high school, was an art-based school where they focused more on the creativity of things, where it's like their compulsory classes were art history, art technique, mediums and stuff like that. And then you took obligatory English and math and science and bullshit. But yeah. So yeah, I don't know where I was going with that.
No, totally understand where you were going with that. It was a good example. It's not art, says Elias. It's a glorified coloring book. Stay on the lines, utilize different techniques, more dexterity than anything.
That's so accurate. Like we are, and so it's literally that. Except, so you have to learn the techniques. It's only the techniques art because we're using a paintbrush, right? Not a crayon. So you have to understand the techniques of deploying paint, right? Which is a liquid. So you're basically just battling opacity and moisture at all times. And then that's kind of easy to kind of work your way through, especially if you watch a couple videos. So like, obviously you can take it further and further and further. And a lot of the best painters in miniatures are just as capable at painting this on a 2D surface. You know what I mean? Like when you start seeing a lot of that crazy freehand work that a lot of people can do. But to make a dope army, you don't need to be that tight. Fucking art.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that I've been streaming for 2 years now, and painting about a little bit every single day, and it's crazy how just the act of painting, muscle memory, and like getting to know like what the how wet you want your paints to be for certain things and things like that. Like it's crazy how you can, if you look back at how you started, right, and kind of go to where you are later, just little things that you do. Like, do you look back at some of the stuff you originally painted and go, wow, like I've come a long way?
Me?
Yeah.
So, I mean, occasionally, sometimes. Like, I can't remember a time that I wasn't doing art, so it's kind of hard. But if I go back in time to like when I was trying to, to like deploying the airbrush specifically, which is a, more of a technical element, I can definitely go back in time and be like, ooh, this is when you hadn't figured this shit out yet. But it's been a while, like I'm one of those kids who spent 20 years on an independent art journey, like before I even graduated high school. So it's trickier for me to answer that question. Like I've always been doing this. My dad, like I have memories of being like 8 and my dad and having an easel and a canvas and my dad teaching me how to paint still lifes, I see my man Jim Vessel. He's like, you don't get to gatekeep on artists. Actually, I think I do, motherfucker.
You heard it here first, Jim. Gatekeeping all the way.
You heard it here first. I'm the literal official gatekeeper of Warhammer 40k art, and I have officially thus declared that this is not art. Which is a hot take. It is art, and I'm obviously teasing you.
You brought up an interesting fact there, Kenny. You said something along the lines of when you were using an airbrush, and it's something that I've noticed that you've started to transition to the brush a lot more than just using the airbrush, applying a wash, and then doing some quick highlights. Like you've really, like for us to see, have really upped your game on doing these awesome.
For you to see, right? Because the only thing you know about me is what I show you, right? So you've consumed my videos and you've seen that, and it looks new to you, right? But I didn't own an airbrush until 2010, dude. I'm 30. I'm 38 this year, so like I have always paintbrushed, right? But like video creation, the airbrush was the hot shit that I wanted everyone to understand you need to get into to get to the fun parts of painting faster and more consistently, and obviously take a little stress out of your painting, because now just getting through some sick base coats, today will now make you stop hesitating, So as the market kind of stabilized and airbrushing became like kind of a staple of miniatures now, I don't think I need to make another video about airbrushing as dedicated, because like I already have like 1,000 of those. So it's more like, what other secretly easy way of painting can I show you? Lots of secretly easy ways of deploying paint with a paintbrush. So that's specifically why that pivot has occurred. But I still airbrush every fucking video. It's just that I don't spend like 8 minutes explaining how to use flow improver, how to do this, how to do that, because I feel like everyone knows now.
Now, do you remember the time when if you used an airbrush, it was like people looked at you funny, like you were cheating?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. I mean,
gatekeeping in the
yeah.
hobby community, right? Like airbrushing is cheating or whatever. I remember.
No, like 10 years ago when I first started this, and all we had was like, fucking DACA and stuff to post on. That's when I realized forums are a place for people to post pictures of their models and have everyone tell them how good the model is, not be a place to go and see pictures of models that make you feel like your models aren't good. And so when I was posting all this airbrush stuff, you got to kind of see that emotion where it's like, hey, look, I just painted 4,000 points of Blood Angels this weekend. Take a look at this shit. And rather than be like, wait, how? I need to get in on this. It was like, nah, but that doesn't really count. Right. So that is like anybody who's jumping into the market, anybody who's going to become a content creator at some point, if that's something they're interested in, there's this really subtle piece of advice I can give everyone. It's like, jealousy is totally natural. It's an emotion. You can't control that. What you can control is what you do with it. So if you turn that into envy, which means you blame everyone else for the problem, you say that you make it seem like they're the ones doing something wrong, then you're going to get stuck in a pretty dark place. If you take it and turn it into ambition, right? Like, holy shit, my man just painted 4,000 points at Blood Angels this weekend in 2009, before we knew what airbrushing was. If you were like, DM me, we're like, yo, how? I was like, yo, buy this airbrush, dog. And you'd be like, thank you, dog. And then you would have had the last decade of the easiest shit ever.
It's something that I've always joked with Skari about, where it's like, it took you 3 weeks to paint a Revenant Titan. You had to put that on my desk. It would have been done in a day. Right? Like,
and even if you did, and Jim Vessel says, like, but brushwork is still 90% of my work. And see, that's a big point, is that like airbrushing gets you to the fun part fast, right? So you can go as far as you want post airbrush, right? You can basically be like kind of more commission mindset, right? Where you're like, I just need to get a sexy transition, got to get some details blocked in, done, put it out the door. And that's a fresh looking piece, especially when it's in a collection of sweet pieces and it's on the table as one unified force. That looks dope, right? Or you can use the airbrush to generate those sick ass transitions, generate some drama. And then now you're to that fun shit, doing highlights and blending some shit. And you're just doing all these little bits and bobs. And at the end of the day, that, to me, that's the fun, lethargic part of painting, right? It's like endlessly and meticulously fucking with small little details and making them cool. Well, now that I've got this dope transition already kind of established, like, I'm instantly to that fun part, and I will literally spend a million seconds on a model for myself. Like my Death Gun army that I challenged myself to paint my first army in 4 years. I haven't painted my own army in like 4 years. And I've been just commissioning people, and maybe I'll paint like my knight, right? Bro, I've spent 50 hours per Death Round Terminator, dude. And I'm not even saying like they're masterpieces or anything like that. They're just pretty good looking Death Round Terminators. It's just that, like, for me, like the fun I was having, that I was the journey I went on. Like I was like, oh, I'm gonna do some stippling here. Oh, I'm gonna create some pinning here, bro. It was like I would pick one of those dudes up on a Friday, man, and I would just like I would just go to a fugue state until like Tuesday. Look at the time. I was like, I just did 50 hours of work. And I would know because I would look at my audiobook credits and be like, yo, you just listened to 50 hours of audiobooks. And I only listen to audiobooks when I'm painting.
It's funny because there's this saying in golf, right? You drive for show and you putt for dough. And I've always transitioned that into painting models. I'm going to use the airbrush to lay down my base work, and it's going to look fine. But you're not going to like fully appreciate it. You're going to fully appreciate my crisp highlight, or that small little eyeball that I've just picked out that doesn't have OSL, but like is an eyeball type thing. So it's that's how I feel about it. My airbrush gets me to, exactly like you said, it gets me to where I want to be to make my model go pop.
Yeah. That's exactly how I look at it.
Yeah, it's not to say that
what is your ancient Chinese technique?
it's not to say that the airbrush can't do some like really wicked shit, like, you know, doing some OSL, doing some afterglow effects, burnout effects, like stuff like that. It's such a tool that, you know, it's an indispensable tool.
Oh yeah, dude, I can't even. It's like every now and then I will just sit down and just like raw dog a model with a brush for funsies. You know?
Ragnar.
I mean, he's still got airbrush. I mean, his entire beginning of that model was completely airbrushed, and so all his transitions were established. So that's an ancient Chinese technique for wet blending and wet glazing. You can use and that's another good one. It's like you can take a model and establish like really good values, right? Like through colors, right? Like so, if you just took your dark blue and your blue and your bright blue, and you painted up him looking so crisp. Like you've got this like palette there now. So now if you want to go in there, like manipulate the real estate and generate some of that more dramatic, like wet blending you see the pros do, to me, like, why would I just raw dog that? Why would I just have a black model primed and then raw dog that when I could build the transition real quick, hit it with a quick varnish, protect it. Then I'll come out with the same 3 colors, and I will just use a combination of wet blending and wet glazing and just kind of squish the drama in all the little panels. And that shit is so easy because the paint's already there. The colors are there. Even the transitions are there. You're just changing how dramatic they are. And so now the coverage isn't a concern, right? Because that you always have that backdrop of the exact same color palette with the exact same transitions. So like that is a gangster technique for doing wet blending and wet glazing techniques over your airbrushing to get that like crystal brush look. Always use your airbrush. Don't make it harder than it has to be. Like set the tone first. And I always joke like, or it's like if you looked at Ragnar, and if there was a way for me to put like a chemical in what I airbrushed that was black light reactive, and you can shine a black light on them, you'd be like shocked by how little coverage I got in the wet blending phase and how much of the backdrop I let exist. You'd see it'd be just spotty as hell because of that lack of coverage that was obscured by the backdrop of airbrushing. So the airbrush, no matter what technique you're about to do, gives you a quicker, stronger, more efficient pathway to it, and usually a lower stress pathway.
Yeah.
Now, how important is it, do you feel, to sort of like use that like lower stress, like style? Like
it's like my primary directive, dude. That's the prime directive. Yeah. Low stress. I look for low stress actions. Like, and I'm very clear when this is a high stress action. Right? A lot of time edge highlighting is a high stress action, right? Which is why like there's a lot of paintbrush strokes to mitigate the stress of it. But it is innately, because of its a higher opacity to a lower moisture, it is innately going to be a little bit more high stress. But there are techniques for mitigating that, right? Which is like what I mentioned earlier on the black armor, versus like just not going straight to gray, but like making it barely not black and doing your edge highlights. That makes the process lower stress now because fail rates are hard to see. And then it kind of gives you a second chance as you add more white into it. You go through it again. And because you already have a stack of slightly not black that you're kind of highlighting against again with slightly more not less black, again, it mitigates fail rate. And then as you add more white, again, it mitigates fail rate. So you're still doing the high stress
lower
action.
Stress rate like levels, basically.
Yeah.
Like you're basically saying, like, instead of having like an extreme highlight, which is like one color, another color,
Right.
it just
which I'm going to eventually do. My final edge will be like almost white, but I will have built some runway for it through low stress action. Right. And so I'm always trying to mitigate the fail rate. And so mitigation of the fail rate is what lower stress levels. Right.
Yeah.
Like airbrushing, everyone, when people's airbrush clogs, that's a fail rate, right? Like, and that makes you stressed about airbrush. And a lot of people like their airbrush clogs a bunch of times and they don't even fucking want to, they're like, fuck this. Right. And so if we can figure out ways to mitigate that fail rate, it will lower your stress and it will make you way more encouraged. Right. That's why videos I'm like unclogging your airbrush. Like,
yeah.
The most common thing that I get from people is like, well, I got an airbrush, but I really need you to take me step by step through it. And I'm always like, just pick it up and use it. It's the only way that you're going to like learn your style is you just pick it up, put some paint in it, just put paint in it. You don't like, if you don't put thinner in it, find out what happens. Find out what thinner works for you. Some people use Windex. Some people use whatever. Don't use Windex.
Big lights flashing screen. Don't use Windex.
Don't drink your paint water, but do. But like, just use it. And they're like, yeah, but can you just show me? And it's so funny because like I'll cave eventually. I'm like, yeah, sure, bring it into the shop. And we plug it in, and I put some thinner into it, and I put some paint, and I grab their model and go, there you go. I just taught you.
Right.
But how do I do all that? I'm like, dude, seriously, just do it.
Yeah. Watch a couple videos. Know what's
precisely.
Elias said non-metal metallic 100% brush workup is the undiscovered country for me. Vince Ventrilo knows the way. He does. He's one of the greatest painters of our lifetime, of our generation. What's interesting about that statement, though, is like I do a lot of NMM classes, and that exact thing I was talking about with Ragnar, like I always set the stage with my airbrush because non-metal metallics is an effect, right? And the effect is that it looks reflective. So you're trying to trick somebody. All effects in miniatures are tricking you into seeing something that's not there, right? In OSL, this is glowing. It's literally not fucking glowing. It's not. This sword is reflective. It is not. But I'm tricking you through an effect. And effects are procedures, right? So they do have like a technical procedure and a couple of rules to make somebody think it's reflective. And so if you know those rules, you're going to be in a pretty good place. But I won't lie, like the brush part of non-metal metallic, you got to have a good technique for glazing, right? So glazing is a technique when you deploy it with a paintbrush. So you got to have a strong foundation of techniques to even tackle an effect like non-metal metallic. The cool thing about airbrushing is airbrushing innately is glazing, right? It lowers the opacity. You can mitigate the moisture level with your trigger pull. So you can establish pretty aggressive non-metal metallic effects by following the procedures and the rules. And then because you understand how glazing works and you got the technique with your paintbrush, you can go and manipulate what you've done and get to that non-metallic final destination like this with even more flawlessness, right? Now, no paint job has to be flawless. That's a style. That's another concept, right? Vince, Sam Lenz, people like them, you look at a lot of their paint jobs, it is not flawless transitions. You know, like you can see brushstrokes and stuff sometimes. But what they do is they deploy paint, highlights, and shadows always in the right spot. Like that's the contrast of painting. And in art, there are some concepts that are not subjective, right? Contrast is one of them. You got to have contrast. There's no rule in art that says the paint has to be smooth to the touch and there can be no visible brushstroke. That's not a rule of art. That's a style. And so those dudes will always put the highlight in the right place. Always. And they don't care about like always the flawlessness of dispersion. But they make these things look incredible. And that's when you see a guy painting like Vince or Sam, you kind of always know like that dude has that guy knows how to paint on a canvas.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's all about like the color theory and like
One of the local stores in our area had Sam Lenz come in and run a class, and it sold out in like 4 minutes. That was Critical Hit Gaming Lounge. It was amazing.
Yeah, which is awesome.
Sam Lenz was actually out in Los Angeles, like I think 2 years ago, teaching a class. I was trying to go to his class, but I wasn't able to. So I actually have a couple pieces here that I've recently finished on Twitch, and it's a good example of using your airbrush to make a quick ghetto non-metallic metal, but also augmenting it off of your paintbrush skills. So this like Kung Fu Frog, this huge glaive, we followed the rules, which is like a crossfade, bright, dark, bright, right? And we airbrushed this opposing bevel, kind of just like spot airbrushed it. But to get, again, the dark line, because it's always about opposing reflections, we had to glaze this black back in. I couldn't airbrush that, right? All I cared about was getting this bright, dark, bright. And then I established a quick glaze over this exact paint job. And even though it looks black, it's really just this dark blue, which is a little bit more black in it, right? Mitigating the fail rate. So I glazed this in to the airbrushing, so it looks like this flawless transition. And so I just followed the rules, right? Opposing reflections, dark to bright, crossfade, bright, dark, bright, and then a crisp edge highlight. And so this was like, not even 10 minutes of painting to get this effect. And then you just kind of follow the rules again here for like these little gems here, follow the rules for the back of this crap here. Just follow the same rules for dark to bright, abrupt stops and starts, the highlights, and you get a really low stress paint job to get that effect you want. And you can go any direction, because I've also got this cat right here. We did another similar effect, right? And this is more preposterous with more blue in it.
Yeah.
And more airbrushing, less brush work, some brush work, and then again on his pauldron. And so very low stress, a lot of airbrushing involved, but comboed off with a little bit of glazing technique. So if you're jumping into painting and you still haven't bought an airbrush, just get one. You will never be sad.
Now, when people ask me about airbrushes and they're like, maybe I'm wrong on this, but they're always like, oh, well, I just want to get like a starter airbrush. And I always say, man, get the airbrush that you want and grow into that airbrush. Don't buy an airbrush that's like, $30 and then realize in a month's time that you've outgrown its abilities. And now you've got to invest another $150 into a better airbrush.
Yeah.
Thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, like I said, this is a technical. This is like a technical trade, is more than anything painting your miniatures. So on all, like if you went to a tech school, they're always going to tell you to buy the right tools. Like you can't fuck around. So buy the right tools. Like buying them, like even as enticing as the Masters bundle for $80 is on Amazon, like no, you're gonna want to buy, like the airbrush you buy should probably cost no less than $100 for the actual unit.
US dollars, $100 US dollars. So that's like $1 million Canadian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. You might have to borrow some money from one of your American friends. That's all you
You can't use snow or maple syrup to pay for this. No.
But even then, like you can get a decent airbrush and compressor combo for well under $300, like well under, depending on how dope of a compressor you want. And you're off to the races. And that's literally just you not buying models for a couple weeks.
True.
If you have $300 in models sitting back there that you haven't painted in 2 years, you just stop buying models for a couple weeks.
Damn, I'm writing that down.
There's one thing I learned from Kenny Boucher. It's if you have a pile of shame that is equal to the amount of money that you could have spent on an airbrush, why haven't you bought an airbrush yet?
Mm-hmm. That's always been my analogy. Where it's like, yeah, I want you to calculate your pile of shame.
I'd have 9 extra airbrushes with compressors. That's not true. That's not true. But yeah.
Is there some do's and don'ts when it comes to airbrushing the Beast Red Leaf Customs? Do's and don'ts. I mean, like I would say my only don't is like when it comes to like what you're doing to thin your paints to go in the airbrush, you don't want anything that accelerates the dry time. And a lot of people who start airbrushing, and this happened 10 years ago when it started getting popular, is people were trying to figure out how to thin their paints. And there are people trying to talk about alcohol, Windex, and other things, other combos. And the things that those all have in common is they all have a chemical in it that's a drying accelerator. And so people were struggling to thin their paints and not have it be all wet. And so they were thinking that like maybe making it dry faster was the solution. The solution is actually better finger control. There's only really one moving part. It's just you rocking it back. There's more, but like for all intents and purposes, it's like you're pressing it down and it's opening the gate of PSI. And as you rock the needle back, you're deciding how much moisture can get around the tapered needle as it pulls out of that hole. So if you can only rock it back the minimum necessary to deploy paint, it doesn't matter how much water's in the pot. You're not letting any of it out. So so what you really want then is something that slows the dry time, because all your clogging, all your dry tip and all that shit, that's all going to come from paint drying in the airbrush. So flow improver, flow aids, things like that do slow the dry time down. So I use not a lot. I use like when I'm getting my mix set up, I use flow improver. Yeah. And then when I need to keep thinning the paint, it's almost just pure water from that point on.
Yeah. This is a 10-to-1 combination of flow improver and water.
Hell, nothing. I always tell people nothing's wetter than water, baby.
Yep.
I I just, and you'd be shocked. And so that's like the only real don't is like, don't fuck around with like dry and accelerator, like anything like that. Like thinner, like airbrush thinner, I only use it when I'm priming and doing bars because it will accelerate the dry time.
No, makes 100%.
I even know when I accidentally use it because the bottles are exactly the same from Vallejo. And so I did last week on stream where I was like, why? I was like, damn, I'm having some issues with my airbrush, guys. Hold on, I just got to clear this clog. Yeah, maybe I need to clear my airbrush. And then I looked. I was like, motherfucker, I'm using thinner.
I love it.
Case in point, you know.
This well, Kenny, surprisingly enough, we're coming up onto an hour and a half playtime here, which is the how long the stream is normally. And I know we started a little late. How are you doing for time?
I can go for about 15 more minutes.
Yeah, that's about right. 10 or so minutes. So so far I've literally just been mesmerized by. Honestly, the amount of knowledge you have for just art and painting in general has like flabbergasted me, to be brutally honest. Like I'm just sitting here, just kind of like wide-eyed and bushy-tailed, being like, that's amazing.
We need you to come up to the AC North here and run a class for us.
Yeah, we'll get you up to Canada. You can run a class for us.
When you're allowed to cross the border.
Yeah, when we open the border back up, that sort of thing.
Redler has a good one. That's actually, I'm glad he said I saw Vince once talk about being able to paint using 1 to 1,000 as airbrush and still get an effect. Yeah, I do it all the time live, where like I'm painting with a paint so thin, you can't tell because when it's all stacked in the pot, it looks red, right? It looks opaque. But I will do it all the time live where I'll just dump the pot right on my construction paper, and you're assuming that you're going to see like a streak of red. In about 2 seconds, it absorbs into the construction paper, and it just looks like a water stain. Just no red. Like you can thin your paint to preposterous levels, ridiculous levels in your airbrush. As long as you've got that finger pull kind of figured out, you can. It's just glazing. You're just glazing with really low opacity paint, and because you can pull the trigger back correctly, you're also making it low moisture. Low moisture, low opacity is a traditional glaze, and airbrushing does that innately. And so you are the one who decides how opaque.
What do you always say? Air, paint, air, paint.
Yep, I do say that.
Elia says, I'm a TIG welder. You can regulate that with distance, rate of travel, and flow. So like the distance to the model as well?
Airbrush distance is brush size, right? So like it shines a flashlight, like if you had a flashlight and it has a big cone. So I always tell people, like when I'm teaching classes privately, is like, imagine if you drop something on the floor like a little bit and you had a flashlight, are you just going to aim the flashlight down on the floor, or are you going to hold it up a little bit? And then when you see it, maybe you'll zoom in. So like airbrushing, especially when you start and you're just wrapping the model in like your base coats, if you a little bit more distance is like having a bigger paintbrush. So you're hitting more of the model as you're consistently wrapping it in a sheet of paint. And then as I progressively add more and more highlight and I get more targeted, I'm changing the cone width by getting closer, narrowing the focus. So it's you absolutely regulate through distance. Like when I'm doing base coats, I'm 10 inches away sometimes, like,
Just open that beast up and go, right? Yeah.
Sometimes I'm just innate. Like I always tell people too, is like base coats, it's like minimum thinness necessary to facilitate smooth airbrushing. So my opacity is definitely much higher. But the second you start introducing film over water, you have lowered the opacity. So just to get it to flow correctly, you've lowered the opacity. Yeah. And so my base coats, it's much higher opacity than my next highlights. But like basically it's almost a rule of thumb. As I get closer with the airbrush, I'm getting more and more thin in the mix. So I can more and more flawless transitions.
Do you fuck around with your PSI, your regulator, as you get closer, or is you're all in the?
So I mean, that's a good question. So like I did this for a long time, just high PSI, using it a lot of clips, just getting good using my airbrush. But these days they make airbrushes that have throttlers built in. And so what you're looking for a throttler as far from the tank as possible. Right. So you can lower your PSI in the tank. That's not good though, because what's happening is it's saying now you only have 5 PSI. So it's barely loading any pressure into your pot, into your chamber, and the paint's barely moving. But if you had, like 30 PSI loaded in there, and then way at the end of the line, you squeezed it down to 6. So it stays consistently pushing that 20 or 30 PSI into the pot, but you're only letting 6 out. That's the good shit. So a lot of airbrushes have those throttlers now. Some of them are down here on the handle. That's better than manipulating your PSI, but still not as good as way down at the tip. So I use a Mr. Hobby airbrush, a Krios, that it's $100. It basically is an Iwata Eclipse clone. Even the parts are even interchangeable. Like, and it's $105, and it has that throttler. That's my. Nice. I use that one every day now. When I discovered that airbrush, and I feel like it's training wheels to have that throttler, and but I'm like, why wouldn't I use training wheels? Like this.
Might as well. Shane and Tori from my neck of the woods say they love you, dude, and they say hello.
What's up, guys?
Also, so before we finish up for the day, Kenny, make sure you're checking Kenny out on Twitch. When's your next stream? What have you got going on? Where can people find you? All that good stuff.
Streaming in 4 hours today.
Nice.
I'm gonna be trying to paint a 3D printed, totally not Lord of Virulence.
Totally not Lord of Virulence at all.
just a cool model that happens to have a big claw and a kind of a double-barreled flamer in one hand.
I have another question. Actually, I just thought of this. I met somebody going to a tournament in Vancouver, BC, that painted like a full Death Guard army just using blues and yellows to get greens, like at different shades. Like, didn't use any green and just used blues and yellows as like glazes and washes. Have you ever kind of used that sort of effect of like just using colors to like that aren't the actual color to get the color that you want? If that makes sense.
Yeah, all the time. When you get into more art theory, that's just kind of how you paint when you need to. Like paints, and the funny thing is like, so this paint I'm holding in my hand, like a lot of times you're gonna say like the color. You're gonna be like, oh, I got white. I got this color. I got this yellow, this color. But like there's a disconnect. This isn't a color, there's a paint. This is a paint that somebody made for you. And it probably has tons of colors in it you're unaware of. So like all painting is like that, especially when you're dealing with liquid pigments. They're based on the CMYK palette. And a lot of what you've learned in school about like colors is wrong. Like, for example, people think red is a primary color, right? This is bold power red. So this is like perfect red. So people are like, oh, it's red, right? It's like, well, yeah, it is as a paint, but it is 50% magenta and 50% yellow. That's what makes red. So like red is a secondary color. Like it's just a lot easier not to talk about CMY spectrums, but a lot of what I'm doing when I'm generating filters or like glazes, when I'm trying to be fancy, is absolutely understanding that relationship between colors and how they stack on top of each other, like in transparent layers, generating an opacity at some point, but how they're going to interact on that journey, So there's a lot to color theory. Like at the end of the journey, like it gets very artistic, right? Yeah. But getting your models looking clean, having a degree of contrast and fresh, that's mostly technique.
Yeah.
One of the questions that I had in my little list of questions that the randomness didn't get to it is, what is the best white paint on the market?
That's a good question. A lot of people struggle with white, right? Like people are like always complaining about white. So I would say the biggest problem you probably have in white is just painting it wrong. I don't really have problems with white paint. It's kind of back to that point we made earlier about how like if you don't respect the sequence, there's going to be a fail rate. So if you jump to white too soon, it's going to like deteriorate on you. So especially when you airbrush, right? When you airbrush, you see that speckling, that graininess, right? Well, the funny thing is that it always is grainy and speckly, all of it. It's never not. It's just that like you're hiding it in relationships. So if you're using like if you're using like 3 blues, like a dark blue, a medium blue, and a bright blue, when you're stepping up in that chain, those you're barely jumping in value. So the relationship is so close that you don't see the grain. But a lot of times people, they jump into white and they think that it's only a little brighter, especially when you're doing black and white and grays. So like this white and this gray are pretty close. But in reality, this white is like 80% fucking brighter. So it doesn't respect it. And now you can see the grain. So a lot of painting white is just thinning it down more, right? It's just like lowering the opacity more and more and more, and understanding that you can't just jump to fucking the brightest thing possible. There's got to be relationships built in. Having said that, like not all paint companies are created equal. I mostly use Monument Hobbies right now because I think all of their paints are better. But I'm fine with like Army Painter whites, even GW whites. And a lot of people who still can't figure it out with an airbrush have gone to inks, white inks.
Okay, nice. No, that totally makes sense. Richard Sanchez says, paint, baby. Yeah, that's usually how that works. Other than that, you've got your Patreon. You do classes as well. If anybody wants to learn,
currently booked out. We're sold out on classes right now, and I would say at the end of the month is when you see a lot of turnover. So if you're looking for private coaching, one-on-one classes, just sign up at the low tier and then PM me. I'll put you on the fucking wait list if you're interested.
Yeah, there you go. I know that I would definitely benefit from learning some more shit about painting. To help me, hashtag just put paint on it.
Just put hashtag goodly.
But goodly. But hashtag goodly. I absolutely love it. Hey, Jim says Pro Acryl is the best in the game.
Yeah. Monument, yeah, he knows.
Yeah, he would know his paints for sure.
Yes.
Other than that, I just want to say, Kenny, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. This has been an absolute fantastic stream. I've had so much fun. Thank you very much, dog.
Thanks for having me, guys, and appreciate everyone standing by in the audience. Jim, I love you, dog. Get off of YouTube and jump on Twitch, though. I see your comments from YouTube.
Get on Twitch. Come on, let's go. Other than that, make sure you check out Matt with the MattBot. And if you have any old Magic cards sitting in your basement, we're having a fun experiment where I'm trying to find out how many old random Magic cards people will send to Matt and his store for no reason other than to harass him. He's gotten like 3 or 4 boxes so far, so you guys are awesome. Thank you for sending him all your random shit. Because you have some sitting in the basement.
Troll them with some busted ass old Magic.
That's what they're doing.
It's just for me. It's hilarious. It's my prank. On that, if you like this content, like to see more, make sure you support me on Patreon, patreon.com/SkaredCast, and come back this week with another bunch of guests like Stephen Box and I've got Winter's SEO and Deep Spain Games, which is going to be awesome as well, coming on later in the week. Kenny, you're fantastic. Thanks for tuning in. Everybody out there, thanks for coming by. Don't forget to hashtag just put paint on it. But hashtag goodly. Signing off until next time. Bye, everybody. Thanks a lot.